This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you everyone for coming. This is probably the best turnout of any share that we ever had on this show. And I'm very overwhelmed. And that's really going to be the subject of tonight's share. So let's begin with the story. There was a lady who was visiting her husband. Her husband had a massive heart attack. And he's in the hospital bed, and he has this big oxygen tank. And she's consoling him, and she's holding his hand. And the specialist says to the wife, "Look, ma'am, I have to have a word with you." She says, "Fine, no problem." He said, I'm outside. So he takes her into the corridor, and he says, "Mrs. Rubenstein, your husband has suffered a severe heart attack. Do you understand that? It's very serious. But I am convinced that he's going to make a complete recovery, provided that you follow the following 3 directions. You have to change his habit in 3 major ways. Number 1, first of all, all you Jewish women out there, you love to cook with fats and schmaltz and salt and all kinds of unhealthy things. You got to cut that out. No condiments, no taste. Everything has to be bland. No fat, no schmaltz, no salt. Bland food, you got it? Second of all, your husband is a nervous wreck. He's tense. He's anxious. He has too much stress. You got to teach him how to chill out. He's too tight-fisted. You have to teach him how to be more generous. Help him relax a little bit. And third of all, and this might be the hard one, you got to get your husband to exercise. He doesn't move. He has to walk at least once a day. He has to really get the heart pumping. He has to get about and move. And Mrs. Rubenstein, I am confident that if your husband is able to follow these 3 things, he is going to make a complete recovery. So the guy's laying there in his bed. He's like half dead. And he says, "Becky, what did the doctor tell you?" And Becky says, "Harry, the doctor says you're a dead man." Change is a very hard thing to do. It's very difficult to change. It's very difficult for any human being to change. And as hard as it is for a person to change, it's even harder to change somebody else. And as hard as it is to change somebody else, it's even harder to change your husband. And that's going to be the topic of tonight's shir. They asked me to speak about Hanukkah and parenting. So I'm going to speak about parenting, but not parenting your children. I have had this chus, maybe in the last 6 years, to speak many, many times. I'm not an old guy, but at least 2,000 times. And I believe very sincerely that this is the most important address that I've probably ever made. It's not the biggest audience by far, but it is probably the most important address I'll ever make, and probably the most important address for the future of the shul. So let's begin with another story. In the city of Slutsk, there was a renowned Rav by the name of the Ridvaz, Rabbi Yaakov David. He was a Rav in Europe. Eventually, in the 50s, I believe, he actually came to Chicago. And there was a doctor in the city of Slutsk who was a kaifer, who was an apikairos. And he would take a stroll in the late afternoon for health reasons. And one late afternoon, it was Thursday afternoon, this doctor was walking by the butcher shop. And you could imagine, in Europe, a butcher shop late Thursday afternoon, it's the busiest time of the week. And he looks into the store, and the store is completely filled up. It's customers galore. It's really a very busy time. And he overhears the owner of the butcher shop. He's like shouting at the people, "Get out already! Everybody get out of here! I have to go!" He's like pleading with them, "Please leave. If anybody needs meat, come back tomorrow. And if it's an emergency, come back in an hour." So the doctor goes over to the butcher. He said, "Butcher, look, you're not a wealthy man. You probably need the income. Why are you chasing everybody out of your store?" And he says, "Look, I know that these customers may never come back, but it's mincha time, and I have to learn a little bit today, and I have to daven, and parnasa comes from Shamayim." And then he adds the following. He says, "And besides, I have to worry about Olam Haba." And the doctor laughs. "Olam Haba? There's no such thing as Olam Haba." And the butcher says, "Maybe for you. Maybe you're not going to have Olam Haba. I'm hoping that I'm going to have Olam Haba." And that was like a dagger in the doctor's heart. And the doctor recovered very quickly. He said, listen, yeah, you believe in Olam Haba. You really think you're going to have Olam Haba? Would you like to increase your share in Olam Haba? I'll make a deal with you. I will gladly sell to you my share in Olam Haba for 1 ruble. So the butcher says, a bargain of the century. The butcher pulls out of his pocket a ruble, hands it to the doctor, and dashes off to shul. Many years pass. 40 years pass. A long time. And he's still working in his butcher shop. And a very well-dressed woman walks into the butcher shop, and she presents herself as the almana of the doctor. And they exchange some pleasantries, and she says, look, do you remember my husband? He says, remind me. And she says like this, look, last night I had a dream, and my husband came to me in a dream. And he's in the world to come, and he's not in a good place. You see, he told me that they're judging him in the world to come. And they're weighing the mitzvahs and the averos. And he said it wasn't even close. He said he didn't even have a shot. And he was given a very harsh sentence in Olam Haba. And my husband, he starts screaming and crying. And he starts telling the Bezdin Shamalo, look, I saved so many lives. I was a doctor. I was matzil nefashos. I healed so many people, I didn't charge them. I didn't charge the aniyim. Isn't that worth something? I mean, is that nothing? And the Bezdin Shamala says, you're making a good point. It's worth a lot. There's one problem, pal. They said, you shot yourself in the leg. You sold your share in Olam Haba to the butcher. So there's nothing we could do. You gave it up. You would have had a really nice share in the world to come. But you sold it. You gave it away. And my husband came to me in a dream, and he's begging me to come to you and to nullify the sale. He's telling me he's eternally doomed if we don't, make another arrangement here, if we don't exchange the original sale. So the woman takes out of her pocket the ruble that the butcher had given her husband 40 years earlier, and he says, here, take it back, I need the mitzvahs. And he's looking at her, and she's looking at him. And she says, look, this is not the only time I had the dream. I'm having this dream every single night. My husband's coming back to me. He's screaming. He's crying. Give me my Olam Haba back. Do something to help me. And the butcher says, you got to be kidding me. Look, I'm a simple butcher. Who knows if I have too many mitzvahs to my credit? Maybe I won't even have a share in the world to come. But now that you're telling me that your husband had so many mitzvahs, he saved lives, and he didn't charge the aniyim, and he had a big share in the world to come, and I bought it off him, there's no way I'm giving it back to him. So sorry, you're a nice lady, but I got to worry about my eternity. And he closed the store. And that night, the woman goes home, and she had another dream. And this time it's not a dream, this time it's a nightmare. And the husband is crying, and he's shrieking, and he's pounding. And he said, I will be eternally doomed if you don't exchange the original deal. What I need you to do is I need you to go to the Rav of the city, I need you to go to the Ridvaz, and tell him there's a mekach tos over here. Tell him there's a problem here. We got to exchange the original deal. And she goes to the shul, and she waits outside. And she waits for the Rav to come out of the shul, and the Ridvaz sees her. And I'm not sure how many Rabbanim would actually take such a thing seriously, but he took it very seriously. And he said, tomorrow we're going to have a din Torah. So the Rav summoned the woman, the Rav summoned the butcher to a din Torah that he says is going to take place in the main shul of the city. And it's like the town is abuzz. They never heard such a crazy court case. It's not, nobody's suing anybody. The woman is suing the guy for her husband's Olam Haba. This is a Ma'isa Shahaya. And the entire shul fills up, and people are chattering, and people are yapping, and people are talking. It was on every WhatsApp, whatever that was back then. And everyone's offering their opinion, everyone's offering what they feel the halacha should be. And the woman gets up, and she says her side of the story. And he says his side of the story. And the Ridvaz says, give me 30 minutes, and 30 minutes I'm going to come out of my office, I'm going to issue a psak din. And 30 minutes later, and you can imagine, everybody's offering their opinion, everybody's saying, some people are siding with her, some people are siding with him, and everybody has their opinion. And the Ridvaz comes out 30 minutes later, And just bear with me, I never gave this class before and I was quite sick today. The Ridvaz came out 30 minutes later and he said, the psak is as follows. It has 3 segments to the psak. The first chapter of the psak is, the sale is batal, the sale is nullified, the sale is null and void. And everyone has like a palpable sign of relief. Everyone's like, shoo, the sale is void. The Ridvaz explains, Olam Haba'ah is not a tangible item. It's not a house. It's not a car. It's not an entity that you could transfer from one owner to the next. Olam Haba'ah is the light, the illumination that is created when you do a mitzvah that shines in your neshama. You can't buy it, you can't sell it. Limashal, the Ridvaz says, you hire a forester, you hire a woodsman, you hire someone to chop down the wood of your forest. And you tell him, I'm giving you $500 to chop down the wood of my forest for a month. And at the end of the month, you pay the woodsman, and he says, you know what? Instead of giving me the money, give the $500 to somebody that I owe the money to. So he could do that. $500 is an entity, it's a physical entity. It's transferable. But think for a moment, just imagine, this forester has been working in the forest for a month. He's out in the mountain air. He's exercising his muscles. He just gained health. Could the forester say, all the air and all the good health and all the perk to my breathing that I achieved in the last 30 days, I want to transfer to somebody else? It's not transferable. It's not an entity. It's not a physical entity. Says the Ridvaz, Olam Haba'ah is the light that you alone achieve. Nobody could get it for you. Nobody could give it to you. Nobody could sell it to you, and you can't buy it. And therefore, the sale is null and void. That's the first segment of the psak. Says the Ridvaz, but not so simple. The doctor lost his share in the world to come. And everybody gasps. The doctor lost his share in the world to come. That's right, the Ridvaz says. Because the Gemara tells us that it is possible for a person to lose their mitzvahs. The pasuk says, Tzidkas hatzadik lo tatzilenu b'yom pishav, that a person's righteousness possibly cannot help them. When will a person's righteousness not help them? The Gemara says if you're mischared, if you regret what you did, then you lose what you did. And this doctor was not interested in his mitzvahs. He forfeited his mitzvahs. He sold his mitzvahs. The Gemara says in Kedushin that if you don't value Olam Haba'ah, then you don't get Olam Haba'ah. And this doctor sold his share in the world to come, so he lost his share in the world to come. And everyone's devastated. Here, the poor doctor, not only did he lose his ruble, right? Not only does the ruble go back to the butcher, he also lost his share in the world to come. And finally, says the Ridvaz, one last clause. The Kiddush Hashem that came about through this court case was so magnificent, was so overwhelming. And who was the cause of this Kiddush Hashem? The doctor. That Kiddush Hashem can never be taken away from him. The Mishnah says in Avos, Hamezakes harabim, zechus harabim taloi boy, that if you make the multitude righteous, the zechus goes to you. Says the Ridvaz, what was the Kiddush Hashem that came about as a result of this court case? Says the Ridvaz that the Kiddush Hashem was unfortunately to most Jews, and when I talk about Jews, I mean us, from a Yidden, observant Jews. To most Jews, the concept of Olam Haba is just a concept. It's just words. Yeah, Olam Haba, it's just an idea. But do we live our lives worried about Olam Haba? Yes, I know. We live our lives worried about our houses. We live our lives worried about our clothing. We live our lives maybe worried about our children. But do we live our lives worried about Olam Haba? Are we worried? What's our house going to look like forever and ever and ever and ever? Or are we just worried about the tiles of our house for the next 60 years? Which is more important? Which is longer? Which is a more important investment? Says the Ridvaz, people mistakenly relegate Olam Haba to the conceptual, to academic. And people don't take it seriously. People don't think about it. It's not on people's minds. But through this court case, Olam Haba became more of a reality. It became something real. It became something that people think about. It became something that people worry about. From this court case, people realized life is not a joke. Life is important. What you do matters. What you say matters. What you think matters. And it matters forever and ever. And this insight and this understanding that came about as a result of this court case, says the Rabbi, accrues to the merit of this doctor. And therefore this zechus that he has will protect him from any punishment in Olam Haba. And I believe that this topic is so fundamental and so basic that it is the most overlooked topic in all of Judaism. I want to give out a sheet. You could just quickly give it out. Don't get scared. Just two sources I want you to take a look at. And men could go to shiurim, and women could go to shiurim, and they could hear topics about this and about that, and about this mitzvah and about that mitzvah, and nobody ever talks about the most important concept that you'll ever hear about. And literally, what I'm about to tell you is the single most important idea that any Jew needs to live with every moment of life. And it's a Mishnah we're all familiar with, and it's a concept that you can never hear about enough, and you'll never hear about it. And the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, Rabbi Yaakov Omer, Rabbi Yaakov says what I consider the 7 most important words in Judaism. Olam hazeh doimeh leproizdar b'fnei ha'olam haba. That this world is a hallway before the world to come. That means it's not really that important other than it's a preparation for something else. And the more significance we place on this world and what it has to offer, the more we're completely missing the boat about what life is all about. This is the single most important factor that should be involved in any decision a person ever makes. Where do I live? Where do I daven? Who am I friendly with? Where do I send my kids to yeshiva? Where do I go on vacation? What do I do? How do I present myself? Am I interested in this world? Or am I interested in the world to come? That is the single most important decision anybody has to make in life. Yeah, sorry, if you thought that this was going to be like a really feel-good, fuzzy message, sorry, wrong night. This is something that you'll never hear, and I'm very happy, I'm very grateful that you came tonight. So let's talk about, tonight is a gathering for Noshim Tzidkaniyos, for the women of the shul. The goal of life, you say, hey, I never thought about that. Well, it's a good time to start. So how do we get there? How do we achieve the purpose of what Chazal say the Rebbe Shalom created us for? So you say, mitzvahs, there's so many beautiful mitzvahs to do. So this is Yisoid Gado, a tremendous principle. And I'm sure we've all heard this Chazal, and I'm sure we've heard it 1,000,000 times. We have to be clear what it means. The Gemara says in Masechta Brachos, just one line of Gemara, okay? Nothing will happen. The Gemara says in Masechta Brachos, Amar le Rav Reb Chia, Noshim b'mai zachia. How will women get Olam Haba? And you say, what? What kind of ridiculous question is that? What do you mean, how will women get Olam? Is there a shortage of mitzvahs? I mean, what? We could daven, and we could do chesed, and tzedakah, and halakas neiros. I mean, there's a big Torah out there. What do you mean, how will women get Olam Haba? And listen to what the Gemara answers. The Gemara answers, there are 2 ways. Be'akruye banayu lebei knishta, when one's children learn in the Beis HaKnesses, uve'asnuye gavrayu be'rabbanan, and when your husbands learn in the shul, ve'notrin legavrayu ada'asu mi be'rabbanan, and the wife waits for her husband to come back from shir. So listen to what this Gemara says. The Gemara says there are 2 ways for a woman to get Olam Haba. Number 1, the learning of their children, and number 2, the learning of their husbands. What? Those are the only 2 ways? What about my davening? And what about my chesed? And what about my tefillah? And what about my halakas neiros? And what about my chala? And you know what the Gemara is teaching us? A yisoid gadol, that in this generation, people forget about. And that is, there's so many wonderful mitzvahs, and they don't hold a candle to learning Torah. Learning Torah is by far the most important mitzvah in the Torah. The pasuk says, "Ki ner mitzvah v'Torah ar." A mitzvah is just a candle, but Torah is the light. Torah is the light, which means that a woman needs somehow to access the most important mitzvah. So you say, great, I'll come to a shir. And it's wonderful when women come to a shir, but guess what? They don't have to, and they're not accessing the mitzvah of Talmud Torah when they come to a shir. There are only two ways: the learning of their children and the learning of their husbands. And when it comes to the learning of your children, I'm not talking about that. I believe that's forefront on everybody's mind. The reason why I called this gathering together, aside from the fact it's a beautiful thing to get together for learning, is I'm soliciting your help. And that is, a person has to realize, a woman has to realize, that not a priority, or like, it would be a nice thing if my husband learned, that would be nice. But, whatever, one day, one of these days. No. Priority number one. Priority number one is that a woman should feel a certain responsibility, not only for their children, but for their husbands. And it's not an easy job, I'm telling you. Yet, I could call a women's shir every week, we'll have 50 women here. So why aren't the guys coming out? It's very hard for them. It's very hard for them. It's much easier to get women to come to a shir. That's my experience. Now, there are different neighborhoods. I've given shiurim in many different neighborhoods. This is a beautiful neighborhood. There's a lot of chesed here. There's a lot of tzedakah here. What this neighborhood is missing is people are not learning. People are not learning. And that's where you come in. I'm going to tell you a couple stories, and then I'm going to show you where you can help me out. Yeah, it sounds funny, but the Gemara is saying that the number one priority of a woman to get Olam Haba'ah is not just her children, it's her husband. It's her husband. And it's going to take work. See, there are different kinds of guys, I'll talk about it. Some guys, they love to learn. And whatever excuse you could give them, they're out of the house. But I'm sure not everybody's like that. And we'll talk about that. So the story goes, Rabbi Yosef, so he's a young man. If you ever saw pictures of him, he was a handsome young guy. And his future father-in-law comes to the yeshiva, and the father-in-law says to Rosh Yeshiva, look, I need a Talmud Chacham for my daughter. She wants to marry a Talmud Chacham. And the Rosh Yeshiva says, look, I'll give you a guy. He's head and shoulders above and beyond everybody else in the yeshiva. His name is Ovadia Yosef. So the Rosh Yeshiva goes over to Ovadia. He says, look, I have a prospective girl for you. You're going to meet her tomorrow night, and you're going to wear your nicest suit. And the Rosh Yeshiva tells the father of the girl, make sure your daughter dresses up nicely. Ovadia Yosef is coming over to the house tomorrow night. And he knocks on the door, 8 o'clock as planned. And the father, who is also Shtikl Talmud Chacham, he opens up the door. And, they start talking and learning. And they're talking. This sugya, that sugya, this Gemara, that Gemara. It's already 11 o'clock at night. The poor girl is sitting in her bedroom. She's dressed up. She's all made up for the last 3 hours. And the father turns to Ovadia, look, I can't believe the time flew by like this, but you can't take my daughter out for a walk at 11 o'clock at night, so do me a favor, come back tomorrow night. So he says, no problem. She was all insulted. The guy didn't realize I'm sitting there 3 hours, he couldn't come say hello even. She didn't really want to go out. The father said, he's a big Talmud Chacham, you got to go out with him. And fine, sure enough, he comes back the next night. And he knocks on the door at 8 o'clock. And again, talking. The father talks about this sugya, that sugya. The whole night passes. And she's sitting there in her room all made up. And she said, what kind of this guy? Is Nishkein men. She's not a man. He can't stop talking the whole night. He doesn't know he came for a day. He didn't come for a Chavrusa Shah. And she said, I'm not going out. The father said, no, it's my fault. I shouldn't. She said, look, I'll try one more time. Do not open up your mouth in learning. Just say hello, give him the drink, give him some tea, and we're out. We'll go to the Brooklyn Marriott right away. And he comes in, the father sits him down, and he serves Ovadia a piece of cake and some tea, and they both eat the cake and the tea. And Ovadia Yosef makes a bracha achroina, and the father doesn't make a bracha achroina. Ovadia said, "Why do you make a bracha achroina?" He said, "I didn't eat it b'chdei achilas pras." He said, "You don't have to eat it b'chdei." And they get into a whole machlokes and halacha, and the whole night passes. And she says, "Well, this guy is not a man. He doesn't know how to deal with people. He doesn't realize he came for it. He didn't come to marry you. He came to." And she said, "I'm not going out." And the father begged, and the father cajoled, and the father pleaded. She said, "I'm not interested in going out with this guy. He's not a mensch." And Ovadia Yosef came back the next night, and the father said, "An Shodik Mira, I'm really sorry, but he's not interested in going out with you. She's not interested in going out with you." And Ovadia said, "Just give me a room. I just want to talk to her for 2 minutes. I want to talk to you for..." Father said, "We're going to tell her. She doesn't talk to boys, if there's tafa." She said, "Give me 2 minutes." He takes her in the room for 2 minutes. 120 seconds later, they come out of the room, "Mazel tov, mazel tov," and they were engaged. And the father said to Ovadia, "What'd you tell her?" And I heard this story from a big Rosh Yeshiva. It's printed in the book. And when I heard it, it literally brought me to tears. He said, I told her one thing. He said, "You give me Olam Hazeh, and I will give you a big share in Olam Haba." In Western society, they invent a concept of romance, that marriage is about romance. Not if it's going to work. Yes, sometimes. But for a marriage to be successful, there has to be a goal of what are we trying to achieve in our house? What's the end goal? And a Jewish family has to have a clear end goal. The end goal is Olam Hazeh, Doimel Efroizda B'fnei Ha'olam Haba. And I'll tell you one thing. I give shiurim to kids, to teenagers, to adults, to seniors, and to mamish senior citizens. And one thing I could tell you I see, not in every single case, but in many, many cases, that not necessarily the biggest Talmidei Chachamim, but the people who come to the shiur are not always, you have guys who are self-motivated, are very often the guys who their wives are on their back. Now, this is a very tricky thing. Chachmas Noshem Bansa Beisa, you need tremendous diplomacy to figure out how to motivate a husband. If you're going to be too harsh or too annoying, it backfires. You have to know how to do it. But really, it has to be a priority. A woman has to have a priority that they should want their husband to learn. And it might take sacrifice. It might mean more responsibility, more achrayus in the house. But there are certain things that are not negotiable. Like when you tell your husband, "Well, I need you today. I got to work. I got to pay the bills." Learning for a man to learn, it's not negotiable. I'm sure when we first got married, we dreamed of our husband learning every day, but sort of with the passage of time, it dwindles. But really, it should be a very, very strong priority, a very top priority. And maybe what I'm saying is unpopular, and people are not going to like it. What can I tell you? I can only tell you the truth. Every husband needs a lot of encouragement. And I know women also need more encouragement. But in this inyan, when it comes to learning, they say a story about Rebbetzin Kanievsky. Who's a bigger man? There's no bigger masmid in the generation than Reb Chaim Kanievsky. When he finishes a masechta, she would come in with a big cup of coffee and make a big announcement to everybody. "Did you know that Chaim just finished the masechta? I'm so proud of him." We're talking about the Gadol Hadar here. He needs encouragement. I mean, you would think he's motivated enough. He finishes Shas every year. But that's the man's, that's the weakness of man. That's the difference between a man and a woman. Talk about that different. A man needs to feel chashav. A man needs to feel chashav. Women want to feel loved. A man needs to feel important. You tell him, "Wow, it's very chashav that you went out to learn. It's very chashav." He should know that you value it. He should know that for you it's a top priority. So, on this note, have another sheet to give you. And this is where I need your help. This is even more important. This is homework. This is a list of all the shiurim that take place in the shul. Seriously. Look, if I'm never invited back to speak, I have other places to speak. Okay, so the first thing, you see the Wednesday night share. So, guys should come to Wednesday night share. That's it. Tell them, get out of the house. What are you doing? Look, right now, there's no NFL Wednesday night. In case you didn't know, NFL is only on Sunday. Thursday night, once in a while, there's nothing doing on a Wednesday night. Tell them to get out of the house. You don't need him in the house. He's just getting in your way. Every guy in the show should come Wednesday night. That's it. What? Basketball. So let's talk about that. So first of all, guys have different things they do. Guys don't need to go out to eat with other guys every week. That is the most absurd waste of time. They should, if they want, they should take you out to eat when you want. But why would they have to go out with other guys? They're already 35 years old. You know, I went into the pizza store on Friday to get some lunch, and there was on a table 4 guys on one side, 4 guys in their 80s sitting around eating pizza. Are you kidding me? That means they waste their entire... There's no reason that, maybe sometimes I understand they need some camaraderie, but on a regular basis for a grown man to go out with other guys, I mean, you gotta be kidding me. They need to learn. I mean, legitimately, a frum guy needs to learn every day. Every single day. However, I understand the realities of life. I'm not sure if guys are very busy, guys have to work, guys come home late. But at the very least, I really want to go through some of the shiurim with you. And you should go home, ask your husband, you know. And they're going to say, look, a lot of guys come. So they're going to say, you know, I don't like this shit. It's Bubba Mises. They need encouragement to get out of the house. This year, that year. I need your help. So look, Sunday morning, what's doing Sunday morning? Maybe carpool, and maybe baseball when it's warm. I know what's going on. But otherwise, it's 9:10, so you could daven at 8:30 minyan. So you said they want to daven 9 o'clock. They're not 14 years old. They're not 15 years old. 8:30 is late in the day. They daven 8:30, and tell them you do not need them until 10 o'clock. Monday night, Tuesday night, there's a Gemara share. Every morning, this one's a tough one, every morning, 6:45 to 7 a.m., there's a Mishnah Berurah share. Do people know about this? You even know? They probably never even told you, right? Okay, so I'll tell you like this. At the very, very least, you should try to encourage your husband to come out to a shir at least once a week. At least once a week. At the very least. Halavai, they come every single day. Once a week. Shabbos, at least one shir. You know, there are 2 shirim on Shabbos. I wish guys would come to both. 20 minutes before Mincha, and then by Shalosh Shudas there's a shir. So they say, no, they really want to eat a challah roll with their wife. That's what's going on? They're coming home, they're eating a challah roll with you? I mean, tell me, if that's really like the key point of the week, then, you know, you earn it, you deserve it. But at least one shir on Shabbos, whether it's before Mincha, or whether it's by Shalosh Shudas, it's very, very important. You got to train them. And they say, no, I'm not in the mood, I'm tired. Just say, go. You don't have to listen. Tell them they don't have to pay attention. They could just sit there. They could daydream. Anybody who comes, they end up enjoying it. They end up liking it. And the key is, you want your kids to see that your husband goes out of the house and learns. You know, somebody once asked the stipler. He asked the stipler, you know, I could learn 2 different times. I have 2 possibilities to learn. I could learn in the morning when I have a clear head. I could wake up really early in the morning and leave the house and learn. Or I could learn at night. When I learn at night, I'm dead tired. I could barely concentrate, and nothing goes in. So the stipler said, do me a favor, go learn at night. I said, well, I can't even pick up anything. Nothing goes into my head. So the stipler said, look, when you go out to learn in the morning, everybody's sleeping. Your kids don't know that your husband's going out to learn. When you go out at night, everybody sees. The kids know. You know. It makes a rosham on the family. Whether he learns, whether he doesn't learn, that's his geschäft. That's up to him. But it's a very important hashpah on the family. Part of the atmosphere, part of the aura of a Jewish home is that the father is learning. And it's something that we sort of lose sight of. Life is very hectic. It's very stressful. There's a lot on our shoulders. And really, we should try to be cognizant of the priorities in life. This is a number one priority. It's not just our children. It's our husbands as well. The Gemara tells us in Masechta Shabbos, Chanukah is coming up, and I'll end with this. The Gemara says there's a machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. How do you light the candles? Do you go down 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or do you go up? So we paskin, everybody knows we paskin like Beis Hillel, that we're moisef v'hoilech. Why? Malin v'kodesh v'ein moirivin. You got to go up in life. And the biggest way to go up, and the most important way to go up, is through Torah, is through learning. So as the Yom Tov of Chanukah is coming, and we're all trying to infuse our homes with the light of Torah, let's try to be cognizant of really primary responsibility. And b'siyata d'shmaya, and it's not an easy job, and some guys are hard, some guys are very tired at the end of the day, and it's a long day, and especially you're out in the world, and your head is elsewhere, and to come home, and to come to a shiur, and to sort of go back into the Beis Medrash, it's very, very, very hard. It's very difficult. And be'ezras Hashem Yisbarach, with your help, and with your encouragement, we're going to fill up the Beis HaMedrash. The neighborhood here needs more than anything else. Baruch Hashem, we have Hatzalah, we have parlor meetings, and we have tzedakah functions, and it's wonderful, but we're missing the most important thing. And you should know, in other neighborhoods, there's much more learning. There's much more learning. And Mirz Hashem, in your zechus, and with your inspiration, with your help, we're going to elevate this shul, we're going to elevate the guys to, we're going to make this a Makam Torah, L'Shem, L'Teferes, a place that we're all going to be very proud of, and hope that you could help us out, the Siyata D'Shmaya, and will bring tremendous bracha to your families. Mirz Hashem, everyone should see nachas from your children, and from all of your mishpachas, and only simchas and mesuras toivos, Abiyas Gal Tzedek, Meher B'Yameinu, Amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.